Hello friends, Mel Jeffcoat here. Well, one day into my challenge and I almost didn't leave myself enough time to complete it. So this is definitely a learning curve, but we made it. Today I'm going to talk a little bit more about Ramon Llull, talk a little bit about his life as he narrated it near the end of his life. I have this book here, which is a translation of this book that he narrated and that a monk put into Latin for him, because although he did know Latin and could write in Latin, he learned it later in life, and he was able to write practical things, but he wasn't able to write beautiful Latin at the time. So he narrated his life story to a monk, and so that it could be written in the sort of Latin that, really well-educated people could write in. So before Ramon Llull started his huge project that ended up with his massive mental training system, as I like to call it, he was just sort of a normal aristocrat living on the island of Majorca in the 1200s. And he says in his story here that when he was a young man, he was given to composing worthless songs and poems and doing other licentious things. He doesn't give us any details on that, but I guess we can use our imaginations. And one night, he is trying to compose a song to a lady that he loves. And in the middle of trying to compose this song, he has this vision, this terrifying vision of a crucified Christ hanging in the air. And it scared him so much that he couldn't write anymore, and he went to bed terrified. Well, over the next several days, he tried again to write this song. And every time he tried, he'd get that same vision again. And talk about writer's block, man. But finally, after the fourth or fifth one of these visions, he started to think, maybe there's something to this. Maybe God wants me to do something. And he gave it a lot of thought. He didn't really know what he was going to do. He hadn't really been educated all that much, more than just a typical aristocrat. He knew some Latin, but not enough to be a scholar. But it just would not leave him alone, this idea that he was supposed to dedicate his life to God, and he suddenly developed this idea that he was supposed to write a book, the best book in the world, that would be able to convert the Saracens, as they called them then, as Muslim, as we say now. And, this was in the 1200s, during the time of the Crusades. Crusades stretched over a very long period of time, where Muslim countries and Christian countries were fighting over similar territory and trying to convert each other, and it was a big, long conflict for a long time. And Majorca, where he grew up, had been Muslim territory until pretty recently, when it was reconquered by the Christians. So he grew up living amongst Muslims who happened to be enslaved because they had just lost their territory. So he was familiar with them, but he didn't know their religion or their language or anything like that very well at that point. But that's what he set his sights on doing, was to be able to come up with something that would convince these people that Christianity was true. Now, this was the starting point of his system. If that's all it ever was, I wouldn't be interested in it. It wouldn't have had the effect through the centuries that it did. But in the process of trying to come up with a way that he could convince other people of the truth of Christianity, he came up with this way of thinking about anything. And he realized this about halfway through his career, that he was creating a universal science, as he called it, You could think about anything. You could train your mind to think with his system and his methods. So while the truth of Christianity and wanting to convert people was always a theme with him, what he ended up building had much larger implications. And so we'll be looking at that in future videos in more detail. But this is just to give you sort of an idea of where he was coming from and what sort of culture and milieu he was living in, and what his ultimate goal was. So that's it for today. Thanks for watching, and until next time, keep exploring.